Wednesday, April 21st, 2021, and we have an agenda for our meeting today. I am Susan O'Million. I'm the co-chair of this august body that's meeting once again virtually. It's lovely to see everybody in the way that we see people these days. We have a few people who are not able to join us today, and I believe we have one person on the phone today. And there are, as we have been notified, there's a few vacancies, so we'll go through that a little bit later. But what I thought we would start with, as we usually do, although I think we pretty much know each other over the last year here, is to just go around and introduce ourselves and just say a little bit about the agency or the the part of the branch that you represent. That would be great. And I think I can see everybody on the screen. So if I miss somebody, please jump in. So I'm Susan O'Million. I'm an attorney. I live in West Hartford. I have been co-chair for a number of years, and I do work with victims, particularly victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, helping them move from victim to survivor to thriver. It has been an honor to be here, and also to have the opportunity to spend a lot of time learning what's going on in other parts of your agencies and your functions. So with that, I'd like to go around and have everybody introduce themselves and just check in a little bit about where they currently are working, and we'll get around the circle. So I'm going to start with Beth, because she's right in the middle of the Hollywood squares here, as far as I can tell.
That's my favorite position, because I think that's Alice in the Brady Bunch, who I really love. So
okay, that's another reference point that we were probably showing how generationally we're not where we are. Go ahead, Beth.
My name is Beth Hamilton. I'm the executive director of the Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence, and I'm so excited to be here with you this afternoon on this beautiful Wednesday.
And Melissa Farley.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Farley. I'm the executive director of the Judicial Branch's External Affairs Division, and as such, we monitor the legislative activity, do communications, public education, and we also oversee the experiential learning program for the Judicial Branch. Good afternoon, everybody.
Great. Irene, I know you're on the phone. Do you want to check in?
Sure. My name is Irene Michael, and I'm the Chief Victim Compensation Commissioner for the Office of Victim Services. I'm very happy to be here today.
Thanks, Irene. And Allison? Oh, it's Felina. Very good.
Oh.
I was just reading what was on the thing there. Go ahead.
I've been called a lot of different names, but never Alice. That's okay.
Well, I was wondering who Allison was, but then it's like Felina. I know Felina. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Felina Carpenter, Deputy Director at the Office of Victim Services.
And Jim Morgan.
Good morning, or good morning, good afternoon. Jim Morgan, Program Manager at the Office of Victim Services. I oversee our VOCA Victim Assistance grant activities.
Great. And Andrew.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Andrew Woods, Executive Director of Hartford Communities That Care, and we lead a hospital-linked violence intervention program here in the city of Hartford.
Thank you. And Linda.
Good afternoon, Linda Cimino, Director of the Office of Victim Services.
Right. And Jean?
Hi, Jean Weisbrod, Administrative Support, Office of Victim Services.
Great. And is there somebody that I'm not seeing on my screen?
Debbie Whitkin, do you see me?
I can't see you, but that doesn't mean a whole lot, but go ahead.
I'm the Executive Director of Connecticut Legal Services. We are Connecticut's largest full-service legal aid agency.
Great. And anyone else? Go ahead.
Yep, Shermise Walcott. I'm the State's Attorney for the Judicial District of Hartford.
Great.
Susan, it's Bob Gargiulo. I'm the New England Region Executive Director for Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Great. Anyone else that I cannot see on my Hollywood Squares screen here? Great. Okay. We were still calculating if we have a quorum. I don't know if we do.
Susan, we have 8 now. We
Okay,
have 8 members.
so that's our quorum.
Yes, as we are 12, so we have more than a quorum.
Right. So, okay. So since we have a quorum, what I'd like to do is have a motion to approve the minutes of our November 10th, 2020 meeting. Those were sent out in draft to all of you from Jeannie. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
All right. So Andrew moved. Any second?
Beth, I'll second.
Beth is the second. All right. Any discussion or comments or any changes? All right. All those in favor of the approving the minutes, say aye or raise your
Aye.
virtual hand. Thanks. All right. Anybody opposed? Okay. So the minutes are approved as prepared. All right. So on the agenda, we have two separate pieces that we've been talking about for the last couple of meetings, one in particular around COVID, which is going to be a little later. But we talked last time in November, since the session is moving along here in Connecticut and also at the federal level, to have a roundtable discussion on any particular legislative proposals and issues on the state and federal level. I know there's a couple of your agencies that have been putting together proposals, and if you'd like to do a little update of where they are and anything that might be of interest or help in terms of supporting them. So anybody like to start with that? Let's see, now I'm really confused as to, now I see people I haven't seen before, but the people that were on, I can't see. So I'm going to pick on Beth again, because I know you have stuff in the General Assembly here in Connecticut. Do you want to start, Beth Hamilton?
So some of the things that we reported on last time are not moving forward. Some things definitely are. We're continuing to work on a bill that supports creating safer colleges, requires that folks are doing every 2 years assessments of campus culture and making sure that they're being responsive to survivors. There's a few, the unauthorized pelvic bill, the consent bill, those did not move forward. We've continued to partner with CCADV to support some of their legislation, including one that requires landlords to change locks and a couple of other pieces that they have coercive control. I don't think Jerry's on to talk about that, but that's one that's continuing to move forward. And then we're also supporting a number of pieces around child victims and both creating supports for and good response for child victims of sexual violence. And we will continue to support, although I'd love to have a conversation around what this looks like for victims in today's discussion if possible, but continue to support victim-centered criminal justice reform as it moves through the legislature.
Is there a proposal in Connecticut around police reform that's viable right now, or?
So we did pass some police reform last session. Right now, there's clean slate. There's a number of bills that are working on things like erasure and some other places. There's medical and compassionate leave. Some of those intersect with victims' needs and victim issues, but those are the larger bills that are moving through the legislature.
Okay. All right. And I know that Jerry is not able to, from CCADV, is not able to be here today. So I know that the coercive control bill has been is up on their website. Also, was one of the things they've been working on, which has passed in a number of states. And Evan Stark, who is a longtime advocate here in Connecticut, has been very active in putting together those pieces of legislation. So that's a really big piece that would follow some of the national trends. Anybody else have anything either from your agency or on this issue of domestic violence or sexual assault? All right. And I'm assuming, Beth, that you have up on the Alliance's website some references to the work that you've been doing in the legislature?
I believe we should have it up there, but if not, I'm happy. We have tons of stuff that we disseminate throughout the coalition here, so I'm very happy to send you anything and follow up, Susan. That would be helpful to the group.
Okay, that'd be That'd be great. All right, and let's see. Deb Whitkin, have you been working? What have you been working on with legal services?
So we've been supporting the human trafficking vacatur bill, which would, I guess in simplest terms, would clear the way for people who are committing crimes as part of their being trafficked to
Yes.
have those crimes erased and make it more likely that people will come forward and not be prosecuted for crimes that they were forced into. We're also generally in alliance with the Alliance and CCADV, I guess, on the coercive control bill. We have some concerns actually about it being a little bit overly broad and potentially used in ways that could harm victims of domestic violence. But I think that's a larger story, and I think we've all been working collaboratively on language to help deal with that. So I don't think I need to go any further with that. And I think those are the biggest two things that are victim related that we've been working on.
Great. All right. Anyone else on this topic or similar topics? Just trying to see if we can consolidate the conversation a little bit. How about what's going on with MAD? Bob? Did we lose Bob? He's on my little screen, but
He's on mute. He's on mute.
he's on mute. Bob, can you unmute yourself?
If you take your cursor and rove it over the screen, something should pop up that shows a microphone with a line through it, and you can click on that to unmute. And I apologize if you already know this. I'm never sure what to do or
No,
don't.
okay.
Thank you. I just got another screen popped up and I couldn't get out of it. But we're working currently on two federal bills that I believe I talked about in November. One most recently was passed in Congress. It's called the HALT Act. And what that basically will be mandating to the auto industry that all new cars and trucks at some point in hopefully the very near future will be required to activate, because it already is installed in all the cars that we're probably driving now. But they need to activate a system to detect impaired driving, not just drunk driving. So the language is impaired driving. Less invasive than the IID, which is directly for alcohol. But this system that they have and has been available for many years, hopefully will be mandated by the Senate, I believe this month, if not next month. I think it's going to come up. So we have bipartisan support in the Senate. As I said, it passed in the House. In the House, it's called the HALT Act. In the Senate, it's called the RIDE Act, R-I-D-E. We believe, as well as the insurance industry believes, that it will reduce the number of deaths by impaired drivers significantly and basically almost eliminate drunk driving crashes and deaths in the future. Wow. Obviously, it would take some time to not mandate. It will take time for all cars to turn over. So we're talking probably 5 years or so, if not more, when all the older cars are off the road and all these newer cars with this activated technology would be in place.
That's a quite remarkable outcome there. Wow.
Yeah, we're very pleased. We know, and once again, the statistics by NHTSA and the insurance industry claim that up to 10,000 people would be saved each year. And that's the number we're hovering around each year, the deaths attributed to drugged and drunk driving in the United States. So this would in effect eliminate that, but also the impaired drivers, and that could be, people that need to sleep, pull over and rest, especially with truck drivers and such. So, yeah, this is rather significant. And most recently, the alcohol industry is supporting this bill as well. So that's a great plus.
I was just going to ask you, who is in opposition to this phenomenal
Well,
idea?
As I said in November, the auto industry is in opposition unless it's mandated across the board. The technology, as I said, has been around for quite a while. No one's let that out of the bag, but no one wanted to be first because they thought their sales of their cars would decline. Right. So once it's mandated across the board and it's an even playing field, and it's not an additional, it will be an additional cost, I'm sure, but it will be built into the price of all new cars and trucks. And but once again, across the board, it's not going to be an option that you could choose. It's going to be something that's installed in your car.
Wow. All right, we will await that. That you have a strong support in the Senate is really quite remarkable. So
yes, definitely.
You go for it. That's great.
You.
Anything else you're working on? Solving world peace or anything that you might want?
No, I took on the new role of New England, so I am actually Linda Cimino. Thank you so much for providing me with some resources. I've reached out to the New England states where we don't have a strong representation, namely the northernmost states, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. We do have some volunteer activity and events in Maine, not so much in Vermont and New Hampshire, but our goal is to get people on the ground there helping victims. We do provide our 800 number for victims in need, but we want to be able to do the face-to-face obviously meetings and such, and hopefully by 2023 we'll make that a reality. So thank you again, Linda. I've spoken with all 3 states. It's going to take some work and some time. As we know, we're fighting the VOCA fix and the cut in funding right now. Actually, we're at this moment, and that's why I was on another screen. We're having a national tweet and social media on VOCA Fix. We're getting the word out as many times as we can in this next hour across the country. Matt is doing that in unison, and hopefully that it'll raise some eyebrows. We'll get some support, and hopefully we won't be realizing any cuts in the future, which I know is on the table.
Yes, we did talk about the VOCA Fix of Victims of Crime Act. I don't know if anyone on the screen might address that in a minute here. We'll come back around to that. Let's see. I also have Sharmise from Criminal Justice. Do you want to check in on any legislative proposals or actions that you're working on?
Hi, Susan.
Hi, there you are.
Here I am. We had an omnibus bill that we put forward. So it was a bill where we had some agreement with the Public Defender's Office and other stakeholders, and that did make it out of committee. I think at the last meeting in February, Gail Hardy reported that we were in support of the legislation that was going forward with the Trafficking in Persons Council. And I did testify there in support of all the changes. There was changes to the language to make trafficking cases or the trafficking statutes more consistent. We were not in full support of the vacator statute, as right now it includes the ability to vacate A and B felonies, and it's not specifically excluding trafficking, but it includes all. So that could include homicides, but otherwise we are in support of the vacating of lower level offenses. So C felonies on down through misdemeanors. And we continue to partner with various victim groups and support victim-centered legislative proposals. So, yeah, that's our update.
Great. All right. And Andrew, do you want to check in on your legislative actions or proposals?
Yes, sure. The bill that we have in the House is now going to be heading to the floor. It got voted out of the Public Health Committee, which is HB 5677, concerning the availability of violence prevention services under Medicaid. And so actually we were very pleased that the entire Public Health Committee, both Republicans and Democrats, voted 100% in favor of that bill. And so it will be advanced into the House and then possibly over to the Senate and then onward.
Can you explain that just real quickly? I know we have some background, but.
Sure, absolutely. The whole point, the emphasis of the bill is that you have, just like licensed clinical social workers, you have individuals who do specifically violence prevention intervention work, such as a hospital-based violence intervention program, street-level intervention specialists, to where another funding stream or opportunity to support this work can be paid through Medicaid dollars. As I indicated in a previous meeting, 95% of gunshot victims in Connecticut, as well as a vast majority across the nation, those injuries are covered by Medicaid. And so to do our work and to be able to do more of it and to make a greater impact, and as well as make sure that there's a career opportunity to support those who want to do this work, the Medicaid bill will actually aid with that particular effort to make sure we can have sustainable resources to provide that level of care to individuals impacted by violence. And so that's
And you've talked about that increase in those kinds of violence, that kind of violence, particularly during COVID. So you have really seen the need to keep those resources flowing.
Absolutely.
Now, do other states have these kinds of legislation, or is this something that?
California attempted it, got all the way to the governor's desk, and then he vetoed it. If we are to get ours through, we would actually be the first in the nation to get this kind of legislation passed, as well as towards implementation. We were also pleased that President Biden listened to our colleagues and some of our recommendations to him related to VOCA and Medicaid, related to Medicaid in particular, as well as other avenues of which to support this work, where he has communicated to all states to take a look at Medicaid to support victims of violent crime. In other words, do exactly what we're attempting to do here in the state of Connecticut.
Wow, I love it. A leader in the country. That's great, Andrew.
Yes. And so in addition to that, our colleagues, and again, speaking back to President Biden a couple of weeks ago in the Rose Garden, he actually put emphasis on all of the recommendations that we discussed with him during the transition period. One of which you may have heard about is now $5.3 billion towards these kinds of programs, evidence-based violence prevention and intervention programs. And that's, of course, included in the infrastructure bill. And so that bill passes and this particular $5.3 billion remains intact. That will be another great infusion of capital for those who do community-based violence prevention and intervention programs. He also included in his remarks that he took some administrative actions and ordered 5 federal agencies to start funding these types of initiatives. So in other words, not to just wait on that bill to pass, but also to put dollars into the streets to support, again, evidence-based violence prevention and intervention programs. And those RFPs will start coming out. In fact, they've already started coming out. And they will be coming out over the course of the next several months for those who do this work. And so we're pleased on that end, as well as we've been engaging our other state lawmakers and federal partners around the American Recovery Act funds, which actually is a huge infusion of capital, both into the states as well as into the counties and municipalities to be able to take advantage of American Rescue Plan dollars that can go towards anything related to COVID. And so if folks can make the case to connect it to COVID, with the increases of, domestic violence, sex, you name it, the variety of different focus areas that we're focused on here, then we can put the argument is there and the case is there for the services that many of us and you on this line provide. So we encourage people to really get to your lawmakers and talk with them about those American Rescue Plan dollars. And so I think that's it for me.
Excellent. I mean, why not just change the world, Andrew? You and Bob and all of us are just doing amazing things. All right, I think Melissa Farley, and then if from the judicial branch, and also Linda, if you want to do a little report, or any of your staff right now about legislation, or if you want to do that later on. Melissa, why don't you go, Farley?
So as I talked about the last meeting, our Court Operations Bill 6505 included a number of items that would assist victims of crime. There were 2 provisions of the bill where we had some opposition from members of the Judiciary Committee. Those 2 sections of the bill would allow an applicant for a temporary restraining order or for a civil order of protection to sign an agreement under penalty of false statement when they are filling out the application, which is what we have been doing throughout the pandemic for the last year. The current statute requires that there be an affidavit. We talked with the legislators who had concerns, and eventually there was an amendment to the bill. It was not passed. So right now those two provisions remain in the court operations bill, and we're hopeful that they will be enacted into law. We've been working with the proponents of the domestic violence bill. There were two domestic violence bills in the Judiciary Committee. They were combined into one bill, 0191. We're working with the proponents on the coercive control language and a few other concerns that we have with the language in that bill. We've also been working with the proponents of the vacature statute. We had some concerns in that legislation about the requirements of OVS to do notification, and we're working very well with the proponents, and hopefully our concerns will be taken into account. We did have a meeting with Connecticut state legislators about our concerns with the VOCA funding, and they all seem very interested in helping us to secure the necessary funding moving forward. So those are the big issues we're working on right now.
Okay. And maybe either you, Melissa, or Beth, I know that Jerry's not here. Could you just talk a little bit about the coercive control legislation and how what that would add to the statutes in terms of domestic violence violations?
So
or you have that, or Beth has that?
Yeah, so let me just see if I have it right in front of me. So basically 1091, right now the current statute really only allows for a temporary restraining order to be granted if there is physical violence, and as all of the domestic violence advocates know, that it also includes coercive control. So the proponents looked at a statute from California, and they took some of the language from California to include in the definition of family violence, coercive control.
So what, can you give us a definition of coercive control? I'm sorry, I'm like the teacher in school, but just so some people may not understand that. What would be the instances where that would not be acceptable in you talked about needs to be physical violence or the threat that the person who is requesting the restraining order has fear in terms of what's going to happen next. But there's a specific definition, I think, if you have that, or
I'm looking it up right now if you want to give me a second, but if anyone else has it, feel free to jump right in.
The legislation in one of them was the behavior was included and not limited to, there's a history or pattern of psychological abuse, controlling behavior, including but not limited to physical violence and assault, history or pattern of psychological abuse, including but not limited to intentional isolation, harassment, intimidation, threats, to or related to the personal safety of the family or household, safety of a child or of the family or household member, denial of access to child of the family or household member, and the exercise of freedom of movement and association by a family or household member.
A much broader definition and a much broader capacity for the court to deal with some of those issues in a particular case. And I know this has been talked about for a while, so I've been interested in how it's been played out here in Connecticut. All right. Anybody else? Thank you, Melissa. That was great. Linda, do you want to say anything about what OVS is working on in particular in legislation? Well, also about the VOCA money the VOCA fix would be helpful.
Well, we can leave the VOCA fix. I believe Jim, were you going to talk about that? Yes.
Okay, great.
Jim was going to do that, and the couple of changes that we were trying to do legislatively last year are included in the bill that Melissa mentioned. Valina, I don't know if you have those at your fingertips.
The only other thing in the court operations bill that would allow victims to attend proceedings of the juvenile court transfers That was passed a couple of years ago without that language in there. It was silent on it. So we're looking to get that amended so that victims and family members can attend those proceedings.
Okay. Anything else that you want to cover? Okay. I think did I miss anybody? I'm trying to go between the screen I can see and the list that I have. So, where are we at in the session right now? A person who no longer pays attention to this with every breath in my body. We're in mid-April. And are we moving towards any major roadblocks to the session moving forward, as it usually does? Anybody have a thought about that? Okay. The reason why I asked that question is we have a meeting scheduled in June, and a regular scheduled meeting, and usually we do a wrap up at the end of the session, or at least as things are starting to move forward, so into some resolution. So we will definitely put that on the schedule for the next meeting, the agenda for the next meeting. That'd be great. Okay, and then I think the next thing on our agenda is a report from OVS about the OVS victimization study.
Thanks, Susan.
Talked about before. Go ahead.
I'm very excited about this. As I reported at our February meeting, the deadline for the submission of applications was February 23rd. We ended up receiving 4 proposals. There were Jim Morgan, myself, an impartial from the judicial branch, and Mark Pelka, the undersecretary of OPM, served as the review committee. We met on March 22nd. A vendor has been selected. I was going to announce the name, but the paperwork has not been signed yet, so I'm going to hold off on that. We're very excited. This vendor has done very similar work in other states. The proposal was very well written and really addressed each and every one of our needs and our concerns. The contract documents were issued on the 16th. There was a couple of final things that they needed to submit. So until those are submitted and it's signed, I'll hold off on announcing that. And their work plan says within a week of signing, they will start literature review. And then the second week, they will start meeting with us and look at the questions. So by the end of the 5 months, they should already have one of the interview tools completed. And one of the pieces that I need to really speak with them about, and I'm hoping Jim will join me in this conversation, is that because we've started late with this, I still want the materials or the information that we're learning to help with the creation or the decision-making on the next round of VOCA funding. So we're at the end of each segment, there is a summary report. So I want to have Jim and I be able to have that conversation about what information that summary reports will include and how useful will they be. And as soon as this is signed, there is a working group, a stakeholders group that was put together and met in October. And as soon as I have the go-ahead to start working with this organization, we will let those folks know. Some of you are on that call, and then we'll really start in earnest to get this work done. So I'm very excited.
Right. So what would you say the overall goal of the victimization study is?
Well, I think they heard us very, very well. Our points are, sorry, Susan, I should have had this ready. That first, which will take the months 1 through 5, They will develop and implement a rigorous statewide victimization survey using a variety of methodologies to able to address, to find out individuals, well, let me back up, to have geographically and demographically represented data from Connecticut, including the rate of individual victimization, the outcome of their experience with the crime, and whether or not they reported the crime, service utilization, and then unmet needs. Then the second phase will be in-depth interviews with victims of crime in underserved communities. We have a large focus on historically underserved communities and how we can better address those needs, and to see what particular needs are being served, but more importantly, what aren't. And that work will happen between months 6 and 8. And then the last 3 months, months 9 through 11, they will be engaging in focus groups with actual victim service providers to have an understanding of the communities that they serve, and also the underserved communities, what we've learned, and the triangulation of the victim experience from the perspective of the service provider.
Right. So it would be it will inform funding decisions, and also it sounds like just how the services are distributed and what could be some policy that changes that might come out of that, or service, I don't know, just the idea. We were talking about collaborations where there needs to be more collaborative efforts to get services out there, and accessibility. We're learning a lot about accessibility, which is actually one of the items on our agenda today. Is we have learned a lot about accessibility to services in COVID time, where we didn't have the usual delivery in person and in our offices, and now we're in people's kitchens and whatever, doing things. So, what's the ultimate timeline there? When it will be finished? I know you got months in there, but what would be the end date?
I'm hoping, I counted months starting May 1st, which will conclude. This will conclude in April. Okay. All right. So, and then you have some interim pieces that would be developed and available within that time period? Okay, great. Yes, like in September, we'll have the results from the surveys and yes. And in fact, as soon as this is done and signed, I can put together a summary. We can certainly discuss it again at the June meeting. Yeah, that'd be great. And then you said that there are also so-called stakeholders that are on the council, and anybody else who might be interested in the process and being involved in it. That's great. That's like data. We're talking data and talking to people and getting feedback. That's really excellent. All right. And then move that into funding decisions, which is also really important. All right. Any other questions about that, or? I've been hogging all the questions here. It's like fascinating. All right, and let's move to the OVS report that Jim has done. Jim always does for us, and I'll do it again. In your email for this meeting, there should be copies of the 2 reports that he usually does for us. One is called the Victim Compensation Budget Statement for the month ending 3/31/21, and then also the receipts, the court report on the court receipts. I'm not saying that correctly. Jim's going to do that, but just so you have that, if you haven't got it in front of you, it should be on the email, and it'll also be included in the draft minutes of this meeting. So Jim, do you want to go for it? Jim Morgan?
Sure. I'll start with the revenues first. As Susan mentioned, we passed out the court collections revenue sheet through February 28th. We received $464,000 in court collections through the end of February. This is $606,000 below the court collections through February of 2020, and that was the last month that all courts were operating full 100% before the pandemic struck. The majority of the collections are continuing to come through the ePay services for cases that are disposed of online, so that's really helping the fund while the courts have been closed. Overall revenues into the fund from all sources is running about 1.5 million below collections through the same time last year. So we are hoping that as courts start to reopen and more courts reopen later this month or next month, that those revenues will start to go up. We do have funds coming in, but nowhere near the levels that they were when courts were operating at 100%.
Right, and this has been a trend we've been talking about since a year now, since the beginning of the COVID court shutdowns. All right, any questions about that?
On the expense side, we have the budget statement through March 31st. We spent 1.7 million through March, and this is a combination of state and federal compensation grant funding. So that's about 200,000 below what we spent for March of last year. But we're continuing to use our federal victim compensation grants to supplement our state funding, especially with the decline of revenues into the compensation fund. So the federal VOCA funding, having that available has really been a help so that we can keep processing payments without having to make delays. So between the two, what we have in state and federal funding, we'll be able to continue making compensation payments through the rest of June. That won't be a problem.
Okay. All right, and this is a continuing trend that we've been talking about over the last year of the shortfall in places and then adding to it to continue the processing for compensation funds. Any questions about this, or any, Irene, do you have any comments on it from the account board?
No, but I just want to commend the detail on these reports. They've been consistently just to the gnat's eyebrow. And Jim, I'm just very thankful to you for this detail.
You're welcome.
Yes, we all are, Jim. It's always like, and Jim has a chart. This is great. And he explains the chart to us, and we get it. It's great. It has certainly been times when data helps us, and other times we're like, how are we going to get through this? We don't know. All right.
It's very easy to follow.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that this is very easy to follow. It's just really well done.
Yes. And then you were going to talk about the VOCA fix that's in front of the Congress right now. Is that correct?
Sure. I'll give you an update on where we stand with the federal VOCA funding. As I've mentioned before, the deposits have been declining, and due to the declining deposits, the federal fiscal year 21 appropriation from the fund is going to be $2 billion, which is to fund all states' programs for assistance and compensation. This is a reduction of 24% from the 2020 appropriation. The National Association of VOCA Assistance Administrators is estimating that the formula funding to each state for their Victim Assistance Award is going to decrease by 35% from last year. The reason is that there are a number of costs that come out of that appropriation to fund other federal programs. Those are fixed. Those don't get reduced. So that's why the assistance grant is actually decreasing by more than a 24%. If this happens, that would put our 2021 award at a 6-year low of under $12 million. And just for reference, our 2018 grant was $36 million. So it's been cut 2/3 in the space of 3 years. After the 21 awards have been granted to the states, the balance in the Crime Victims Fund is going to be reduced to approximately $2 billion plus whatever comes in for collections between now and the end of September. So unless additional revenues come in, there could be further reductions the next go around when Congress starts their 22 budgeting. And as Bob mentioned, there is legislation at the federal level to try and get revenue back into the fund. It's called the VOCA Fix to Sustain the Crime Victims Fund Act of 2021. It was House Bill 1652. and Senate Bill 611. The legislation would direct federal criminal settlements from non-prosecution and deferred prosecution agreements, which currently are deposited into the general treasury. It would send those to the Crime Victims Fund. The National Association of VOCA Administrators estimating that if this passes, that could put an additional $4 to $7 billion into the fund over the next few years to help sustain the programs. It passed the House of Representatives on March 17th. It hasn't been voted on yet at the Senate, which is why there is a big Twitter blast going on today to get the Senate to vote on it, because the longer it takes for them to vote on it, the longer it's going to take for the revenues to start going into the fund. So that's where we stand. I think I've mentioned in previous meetings, we have sufficient funding to maintain our current contracts for this year and through next year, fiscal year 21-22, using those older grants at the higher levels, but they will be ending next year. So when we go back out to bid for July of 2022, we will have less funds available. Hopefully things will start to turn around at the federal level by next year, so that this $11 million award will not be the end of it. We'll have more going after that, but that's all we know for now.
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt? I don't mean to be dramatic, but I just got a tornado warning telling me to take shelter in my basement.
Where are you? Where are you?
I'm in Bristol, Connecticut.
All right.
And
I have been in a tornado. I would do that.
Okay, I'm doing that now. Yes. I'll be back.
I know there's weather out there, but I didn't hear tornadoes.
Yes,
Belina, go for it.
Thank you.
Go. Now. All right. My heart just leapt, but it's okay. So, Bob, what's the prognosis that you see on the VOCA fix? If you're not in your basement already.
No, I'm on the shoreline. I don't think the sun's still shining here.
All right.
We're hopeful, we're optimistic, but anything can happen, and we're hoping for the better for all of us, because we can't absorb any cuts. It'll be difficult.
All right. Those are huge differences in funding levels that show the ramifications of all this that can spin out for not just in the current, but will spin out for a couple of budget seasons here. All right. So the last piece that's on our agenda that I want to get to is the roundtable on COVID. We've been doing this the last throughout the last year, just talking about among ourselves, and also for the people who are trying to manage services in this the COVID shutdowns, the impact on victim services, and also the way that we are delivering services. So I'd like to start with Melissa. There's about the courthouses reopening. I saw in the press that it's May 17th. If we could start there, just talking about, I think we're talking about not just the impact as it has been, but where we're going to go next. It'd be great to know in terms of the courthouses and how that's going to work. Okay.
Sure. So, as you all know, from the beginning of the pandemic, the judicial branch has been guided by public health and CDC guidance, and we have made the safety of anyone in our courthouses the number one priority. And of course, that includes victims of crime. And we continually evaluate. And as we saw that some of the COVID restrictions are being lifted or modified, and more Connecticut residents are being vaccinated, we thought it was time to move cautiously and to move incrementally to increase the scope and volume of our business. And that also meant looking at our facilities. So right now, the Judicial Branch Facilities Unit is looking at 5 courthouses that are currently closed. And those are GA5 in Derby, GA10 in New London, GA12 in Manchester, the Judicial District Courthouse at 155 Church Street in Putnam, and juvenile matters at Rockville at 25 School Street. Our hope is that after the facilities folks do a review to be sure that it will be safe to resume operations in those courthouses, that we can do so on May 17th. In addition to that, we're also looking at expanding, in particularly, the scope and volume of the criminal cases that we've been handling. So we are starting to have more and more people come into the criminal courthouses. We're doing it on a staggered basis throughout the day to try to promote social distancing. And we are working with the state's attorney and with the public defenders and defense counsel to start to look at handling the backlog of those criminal cases. So we are looking at resuming operations in courthouses that are currently closed, and also trying to start to look at the backlog and to reduce that backlog as quickly as we can, but as I said, as safely as we can. So we will go quickly, we'll go incrementally, and if we need to push back for any reason, we will do so. And I should mention that our goal is that we want to be back to full operations in the next few months.
So sometime this summer, perhaps.
Correct.
Would be a good, all right. So that would include the victim services offices, or whatever services are provided in the court would be also opened or in person or something like that?
Yes, Susan, I'm sorry, Melissa.
Yeah, go ahead, Linda.
Susan, I had asked Melina to speak about that, but we have not stopped working. We've been very fortunate. The branch has worked very hard to provide all manner of access, virtual access, and our advocates have worked very closely with clerks to ensure that victims have access through these virtual portals. Our teams are starting to go back in. I've had advocates who've been in the courthouse every day for over a year, and then I've had others who, like anybody else, they've been working primarily remotely. Where the branch is now in a phase in, and we're all working towards that. So everybody at OVS will be, and we were given a couple of different timelines, but everybody will be back in the courts by the 23rd of May. But again, our services never stopped. Right. And I can say, I know Jerry's not here, but also that was the same for the domestic violence victim advocates with the technology that the branch made available, and working with probation. They have also worked every day in the courts.
So any contingencies here, Melissa, anything that might slow this down or make changes? The level of vaccinations, the level of cases that are in the state of positive COVID cases? You're on mute again.
Sorry about that. So Susan, we've really been relying on the public health guidance that's gotten from the Department of Public Health and from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and obviously with the governor's support and with his guidance. And if for some reason it looks like there are more positive cases than there should be, or that there's a concern that we have a new strain of COVID-19 that's not under control, we'll be guided by what the public health officials tell us. And that's why we decided to go slowly and incrementally, so that if we needed to pivot, we would pivot. And I would say over the last year, that's one thing that we've learned to do. We've learned that we need to pivot.
Right. We are great pivoters in this world right now. It's absolutely true. All right. Thank you so much for that. I know there's a target, and there's also other things that will happen. Anybody else want to join in? Anything, Beth? You're back in the center square again. So there you go.
So I mean, I guess one of the things I would love to bring into the conversation, and I hope that this is an appropriate place to do it, is generally the sort of concerns that we are seeing across disciplines about the impact on victims of crime through this time and through not only, I would say, the sort of impacts of COVID, but also some of the proposed legislation that's happening right now in our state. And so we're seeing trends in terms of diminutive sentencing that has been really, really, folks are sort of talking about it as the COVID discount, but sentences that we would have never seen as acceptable in years past and times past. Victim notification challenges that are happening across the board, victims being left out of conversations around criminal justice reform and what some of those things mean for victims, as well as just sort of general lack of, well, I think there has been, and I think it's been hit on in this meeting, places where victims and survivors are more brought into, right? Just lack of, access to technology has created more ability for folks to opt in, which is wonderful. I think there's also places where we're forgetting that victims need to be part of the process and need to have a say and need to be communicated with in other parts. And so I would love to, I mean, I started talking with some folks and would love to hear from other folks either in this meeting or certainly offline about if others are seeing the same kinds of concerns that we are. We've talked to folks, some court-based folks, we've talked to DV folks, and then just generally sort of how folks think that we could collectively as a community of victim service providers sort of come together to make all of those concerns known if other folks are experiencing them also. I think that one of the things that we're sort of overarchingly concerned with is that the sort of pendulum has swung in a way, which I think criminal justice reform is desperately needed, right? There's all that work is important to happen, but I think that we sort of are seeing more and more victims and survivors coming to us saying, I have even less access to and less faith in the criminal justice system right now. And so my fear is with these sort of patterns and trends continuing over time, the sort of buy-in, right? Many people already don't feel safe, don't feel comfortable going through the criminal justice process, right, to sort of seek remedies and accountability for the harm that has been caused to them. My real fear is over time that's going to be more and more. You're going to have less and less victims and survivors saying, listen, I want to participate in this process. I want to stick it out. They are long processes that are complicated. It's a hard system to navigate for folks. And, you know, we have some real fears here in our work with sexual assault victims that as this moves forward, we are going to lose a lot of ground and lose not just a couple years of ground, but lose decades of ground, you know, in the work that we have done to build up the trust that we have for those victims and survivors who want to opt into the process. So again, I don't know if this is the right place to have that conversation, but I would be really interested if folks are seeing that or would love to talk to us here at the coalition. We would really love to bring folks together to see if there is a way to draw more attention to that.
Do you see that as something that's happening not just in Connecticut, but in other parts of the country or the world? Okay.
I mean, in talking with our national partners and our other sister coalitions across the nation, I would say that yes, we do see that as a sort of general trend. In Connecticut, though, keep in mind the kind of legislation that we are putting forward is different from other states, right? So Pennsylvania, one of the last places that passed a version of, you know, clean slate legislation, they were doing something that was sealing records. They were not erasing them. They had all violent crimes excluded. In Connecticut, we're talking about excluding family violence crimes and some sexual assault crimes while still leaving some in. I think in Connecticut, there is this sort of black and white way. We're either for it or we're against it. In other states and the colleagues that I've talked to, there's more nuance in the conversation. There's more folks coming together, sort of stakeholders coming together to have conversations to say, okay, like let's think about this as a really complex issue and let's bring some more stakeholders into it and see how we can make processes that are not all or nothing. And so what we're sort of seeing in Connecticut is something that is happening that is a little bit more, I'm struggling with words right now, I'm sorry, but something that is a little bit more intense, I guess, is maybe the place I'll leave it, right, than other states have seen in terms of that criminal justice reform policy that's happening.
Okay. Sharmise has her hand up in the virtual way that we raise our hand. Go ahead.
I remember how to raise my hand from Rachel.
Yes, very good.
I hear Beth, and it would be a great conversation if she wants to talk more offline. I'm happy to talk with her. I've been noticing that, especially with this legislative session, just as she has, that, you know, right now there's a big fight for criminal justice, not fight, but there's a big movement underway for criminal justice reform, and it's great. But there are a lot of proposals that I know over at the division, we've been saying, yeah, this is going to impact victims a lot. And the question has been, who's kind of filling that lane and giving that voice? And so, you know, Beth, I think it's something that is a conversation that's really important and should be had. And, you know, if you want to put something together, I'm happy to join in. But it's a difficult conversation because on one hand, you want the criminal justice system to be as the best system that it could possibly be. And we have this reform coming, and some may say it's long overdue, and we need to embrace the change. But you definitely don't want so much change that it just results in these huge pendulum shifts where good things are lost for the sake of change. So I agree with you.
Yes. And I think what Beth is saying more than anything is we need the victim voice in all of this, because they will be a piece that will have it be impacted. Anyone else, Andrew or Debbie, on this topic or anything else?
Susan, I just wanted to let you know, I'm not sure if you know that Yvette Young has joined us, so we have not.
Oh, great.
Heard, so I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, because I don't have that capacity to see everybody. So Yvette, do you want to say something on any of the topics we've been on the agenda? But we're talking right now is about the impact of COVID, and Beth has just been talking about some of the criminal justice reforms that she's concerned about in terms of victim services.
The only thing I can, not related to what Beth is saying specifically, but just from a legislative standpoint, because I think I missed that entire section, I had some issues getting in, is that the act concerning human trafficking that I mentioned at the last meeting was voted out of committee, out of Judiciary Committee. So now it's being, it's waiting to get to the agenda for the House. So we're hoping that we'll move forward, because that's going to give us a little bit more substance to our trafficking law right now, where we have some language in there about anything of value for victims, so that we're not ruling out victims who were paid either through drugs or, you know, products or et cetera, because we do have a large population of trafficking victims that don't receive funds for their victimization. And under that law, they would not be able to prosecute for that crime. So we're hoping, this has been like 3-4 years in the making. We need that to pass this year. There's a lot of other pieces to that legislation that there was some resistance, some opposition towards. So we're hoping that it doesn't kill the bill completely, because we do need stronger protections for our victims right now. As far as the criminal justice piece, and I think, you know, what Beth is saying, when you talk about sexual assault victims, DV victims, that whole realm, trafficking victims really fall into that pool. And so I can see similar issues happening for them, but haven't really been hearing much related to the criminal justice system piece with trafficking victims, as far as the conversations and the tables that I've been sitting at so far. But I can definitely see it being an issue that will impact that population as well. And also, just to add to that, because when we went to do our legislative testimonies, the DV bill was up. And one of the things that I noted was a number of victims that did their testimonies for that bill or in support of that bill, and the stark difference between our human trafficking efforts and the lack of survivor perspective or voices that we were able to bring to the table. And in general, with human trafficking survivors, we only have a small pool that we're aware of in general of people who are face forwarding victims, but really having a conversation with some key players around how do we get survivor voice during that legislative process to be more prevalent, because we have not historically done a great job in that area. And when I said, you know, the number of survivors that spoke towards that DV bill was impressive, to say the least. And I think we need to do some more work on the human trafficking side of, you know, making sure our survivors are face forward and being able to help support and move legislation and just any of the reform work that needs to be done in the state. So that was just something I wanted to know.
Okay, great. And Yvette, you missed the part of the agenda where Linda talked about the victimization study that OVS is, which I assume would have some of those pieces in it, that kind of information, Linda? Do you want
Yes,
to talk to that?
that will, yeah, and that I think you were on the stakeholder group, but we're about to sign a contract, which I'm hoping that this work will start by May 1st. And the first part will be developing a survey for kind of across the state. So I will follow up with you about other ways of making sure that if we can figure out a way of finding or attracting or lost for words, and making sure that we're asking something that will resonate.
Okay, excellent. I look forward to that.
Thank you.
And I think the public still doesn't really understand human trafficking in its broadest sense. So I think it's that constantly, people have a very narrow view of it or no view, or they not sure what it's all about, or that victims are not comfortable coming forward. So the work you do is very important along with everybody else there at the village. All right. Anybody else? Debbie, I wanted to hear if you had any. Oh, your hand is up too. So exciting.
I just wanted to offer to Beth that maybe our next VOCA partners meeting, or if we don't want to wait until then, that group might be particularly interested in the topic that you raised, and we could start something via email or put it on the agenda, whichever way you want to go. But I wanted to suggest that.
Thanks, Debbie. I'm happy to do both.
Great.
Right. We could also put this on our agenda or add it as part of this conversation we've been having now for about a year, the roundtable discussion about COVID. But there's also the federal legislation that's coming together on criminal justice reform I think it passed the House and is now in the George Floyd memorial, I guess you call it, legislation that's now in the Senate, and that might be a piece of this also. Because those will be setting some federal standards as well as state by state. All right, anybody else would like to comment on the agenda item, how COVID has impacted victim service delivery, including vaccination rollout in Connecticut? I'm reading from the agenda just so.
So I will, this is Debbie again with Connecticut Legal Services. I'll note that we brought a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights about the discriminatory impact of Connecticut's vaccination rollout, and certainly that, although we were talking about discrimination in the sense of people with disabilities and the racial inequities, we also think certainly for the domestic violence victims that we work with who, because the perpetrators are more likely to be at home now because they're not at work, who just can't get out of the house for anything, including vaccinations. So we've seen some of that.
All right. It's another good, another piece of that, the impact. Anyone else? Andrew, do you want to talk about COVID impact and what's going on with the population that you've been serving? We might have lost him on the. All right. I can't see anybody else. Oh, Debbie's your hand still up, or have you failed to put your hand down? And you're also muted.
So actually, I'd like to ask Bob the impact on, and I should know this, Bob, and I apologize, I don't, of your court advocates being able to assist victims of impaired drivers in the courts while we were in these modified days.
Yeah, no, it's been a challenge. Many of the courts, the ones that are open, are not allowing us to accompany family members, victims in need. So it's been a struggle. We're doing our best. We can't have our one-on-one meetings, or haven't had our one-on-one meetings. Everything's being done virtually or on phone. With our victim impact panels, which is greatest revenue source, we've seen a tremendous decline because, I'm not sure if you all know, but if you're arrested with DUI, you have to, it's court mandated that you attend a MAD Victim Impact Panel where we have victims speak to the offenders. It's not a lecture. It's just, for instance, this is what happened to me, and as a result of somebody making the wrong decision. So that's been tremendously hindered. Typically, we would have upwards of 150 people at a panel. We are lucky now to get 15 people at a panel. But concurrent to that, the courts have allowed us, the judge has allowed us to offer an online victim impact panel during this time. We know that once the courts open and, open the floodgates, hopefully, we'll get back to in-person panels only in the state of Connecticut, whereas a lot around the country they're really only going to online panels. We feel there's more value, it's more impactful with the victim impact word there, but more impactful for a offender to be in person with us and our victim speakers. We just feel they walk away with a better understanding than to do it via their computer in their home. But we also understand that a lot of our offenders don't have access to a computer and may or may not want to choose to use their credit card if they have one. So we feel we're doing a better service to the community as a whole by offering the in-person panels. It's just that once again we're awaiting the courts to reopen full to have our cases heard again. The courts had been given extensions, so once again you're arrested for DUI, you have to attend the victim impact panel. You typically have 12 months to do that. Well, that's been extended 3 months upon 3 months upon 3 months as we go through this pandemic together. So, we feel at one point we'll get the backlog, and we're gearing up and we're ready to handle that. And then finally, a lot of the venues that we have typically used have been town halls, city halls, libraries, churches. Many of them have shut us out. So during this time, we've also had to find alternate locations, and many of these, if not, I guess 90% of these new locations don't have the capacity to have the larger crowds. So we're doing what we need to do. We're hopefully getting the word out with the courts and spreading the word that we're still up and running and we're still available and you still can fulfill your commitment. And that, it's been significant, but, we'll overcome it and we'll get back up to speed.
And it sounds like that we'll just carry on. Never give up.
What else can you do?
Right, I think that's like Winston Churchill. Okay, let's see. Anybody else want to speak to anything else about the COVID impact? So we're on new business. Is there any new business for today? All right.
Susan,
Yes.
Susan, I'm sorry, you skipped over my updates.
That's true, Linda. I'm profoundly sorry for that.
I'm not going to take it personally, but everything else can wait till our next meeting. But there's one piece that I really wanted to share with you. And that is, for all delivery of services, 2020 was a difficult year. And this, I'm speaking now in the frame of our compensation program. If those of you've been on the council for the last few years, we had very significant legislative changes in our compensation program back in 2018, 17 actually, which led to the highest number of compensation applications submitted in the history of the Office of Victim Services. So then, which was, and for the first 3 months of the 2018 calendar year, that number was 407. And again, it went up through the year, and I think we had over 1,600 applications we received. We were ahead of that last year at this time, and then when the courts closed and everything, our numbers decreased until the fall. But for the first 3 months of this year, we received 413 applications. So it got quiet for a couple months last year, but it upticked probably the third, fourth quarter of last year, and this quarter is proving to be, again, very, very busy with, like I said, the most number of applications we've received in the first quarter since almost the history of the office. So I'm really, really so pleased about the ongoing collaborations that we've had. I know with Andrew's group, Beth's group, the DV group, they've just, with all of the difficulties of getting information, getting applications to us, this support, this group of victim services have really supported victims to get their applications to us. It's been really quite remarkable.
Are you saying that large number coming in now is sort of the delay of people being able to get things in, or just the difficulty of trying to figure that out in a whole different virtual world?
I think we really saw that last year, but we're having people drop them off. The ability to submit by email and scan has been hugely significant, especially for individuals or crime victims who were not working work with an advocate in any of our programs, remember, our VOCA teams. So I just wanted to bring that up because we're looking at really a huge year. And again, when statistics are saying in some respects crime is down, that is not proven at all in our numbers. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the reasons that I'm very happy that we've got the victimization survey coming, because I think for the first time we will really be able to have a view of victimization as represented by individuals and not necessarily through arrest reports.
Mm-hmm. Right. Any comments about that statistic? We've got amazing statistics today. And I'm assuming that the company that you are about to hire, Linda, will do that kind of outreach to the programs that are on our council and others that would get as much access to victims to fill out the service. I call it a needs assessment in many ways. What's the need out there? What's being served? What's the underserved populations, and what is not being provided in terms of services to what populations and in what needs. Excellent. All right. Is there anything else you want to say, Linda, before I cut you off again?
No, that's fine.
All right. I do apologize. There was a B to that, but I think we got so excited about Jim's report and all the data and then talking about VOCA that it was like, oh yeah, that's right. Okay. Any new business for today? All right, what I was making notes on is I was missing things, but we have a meeting in June, and I believe we have a June meeting, a September meeting, and a November meeting this year. I don't think we need all. We have 4 meetings a year, right, Linda? I know I keep asking this question because it's
5.
changed. We have 5. Okay, we did one in.
February.
This is
February.
April. We did February, okay. So there is one that we don't need to have if things happen and we need to cancel or reschedule one. Although the weather, with the exception of Alina, the weather has not affected us. I have been in a tornado and it's very scary. So in fact, I'm thinking, how close do I live to Bristol? Okay. So here's my thought for an agenda item. Some have popped up already. Linda's going to do for the June meeting, I'm sorry. Linda's going to do an update on the victimization study, where things are and what might be available. We're going to do some kind of a closure, perhaps, on the legislative session, but also keep tabs of the federal legislative proposals that are out there. Perhaps keep COVID on the agenda. We'll want to see how by June, the courthouses should be open if all things go well in Melissa's territory there. And then also, I think maybe putting that topic that Beth raised on the agenda, at least part of the roundtable discussion about criminal justice reform, as we see it spin out, not only here in Connecticut following the George Floyd decision verdict and yesterday, and also where this is taking us in terms of federal legislation too. So, and I don't know much about the federal legislation, except that it is mirroring some of the police tactics that they are trying to outlaw across the country, not just in individual states. So I think Beth, you raised a really good question about that might be good stuff to do, but then what's the impact on victim services? All right. Anything else that if there's anything, as I always do at each meeting, if any member of the council has a report or a study or a project that you're working on or a topic that you'd like to put on the agenda, please feel free to do that. You can, the best thing to do is to email Jeannie, because she keeps track of this stuff much better than I do. So please feel free to do that. That would be great. Anything else people want to add before we adjourn?
Plug 2 events that are coming up this week,
Sure.
and I can always send Jean the links.
Yes.
But tomorrow, the YWCA is doing their annual Stand Against Racism event. The Village is actually co-sponsoring that event with them this year, because we always do it at our facility. The focus this year is on racism as a public health issue. And so they're going to have a panel of individuals speaking to that issue. Obviously, one of them, related to victims of crime. There's a parent who actually shares her story in a video about her fear for her son's life as a Black male, and with all the deaths that we've been seeing that's happening. So it should be a really robust conversation, really exploring some disparities, but really looking at how racism has impacted our entire system. So if anyone's interested in that, it's a free event from 12 to 1:30 tomorrow. I can send a link to register for that event. And then on Friday, Quinnipiac Law School and CBA is hosting an event on child marriage and taking a look at the child marriage laws in Connecticut and trying to have a conversation about human trafficking and the link between child marriage and trafficking. Mm-hmm. So that conversation will be happening on Friday, and that one I believe is 12 to 2. And I can also send out the registration link for that as well. So those are two, I think, it's nice to have free events, one. It's nice to have virtual events, too. But the topic areas, I think, are fascinating and would apply to a lot of the work that we do through this committee. So I wanted to share that with you guys.
Great. And I'm assuming that those are both listed either on the Hartford YWCA website and the Quinnipiac College, you said? Law school.
But I'll send the link so that it's easy for you guys if you want to register.
Excellent.
I have direct link registration links. So I'll send that to Jean and she can send it out to the group.
Okay. Anything else we want to share or bring up? All right. I think we are ready to virtually close this down. Thank you so much for talking about the impact of COVID on us as a council. I really appreciate that we managed to keep our collaboration going, even though we're virtually, God knows where we are, but we're all here together. So thank you so much. And thank you, Linda, and all of the staff for doing a great job and getting me on Microsoft Teams, which was just fabulous. So much better. I'm still working on my gallery, but maybe by the time this is all over with, I'll figure it out. So thank you so much. You guys have be careful of the weather out there, whatever it's going to be. And we will see you